you hear me okay? Is it working all right? Okay. The pieces I played this morning, Voces mysticae, is an attempt to create a modern theurgic concert repertoire. I am not interested in the traditional understanding of music as emotional self-expression. Rather, I am fascinated by the anagogic potential of sound and the possibility of a concert as a ritual or initiatory experience. These goals grow out of my ongoing fascination with ritual and symbol and are based on several ideas. First, that ritual and symbol are means to engage with and give physical expression to non-physical or spiritual realities. Second, that symbolic engagement helps move us beyond the limitations and biases of discursive reason. And finally, that sound is a particularly potent symbolic medium. Given the importance of sound as a liminal substance, I have long wondered how sound was used in archaic rituals. What words were used? How were they said? Were they chanted, intoned, sung? Were instruments used? Which ones? How so? While the anagogic nature of sound is addressed in many traditions, there is essentially no discussion about what this means for practical music making. For example, the Pythagorean Platonic idea of the harmony of the spheres can at best generate a tuning system, but it does not provide any guidance for actual music making. So the question remained, how could I create audible music that was not just inspired by these ideas, but that could somehow translate them into sound? A clue came a few years ago when I discovered the late classical Neoplatonic philosopher Iamblichus and his treatise On the Mysteries, where he presents the philosophical rationale for theurgy. Literally meaning God work, theurgy refers to ritual practices designed to purify the soul and lead it to direct experience of the divine. Iamblichus is adamant that philosophical contemplation alone will not lead to the ascent of the soul. Discursive thought, based on the division of knowledge into categories and sequential strings, is in fact a hindrance to the divine encounter. Rather, Iamblichus tells us we need to transcend the limits of reason and enter a preconceptual state of unknowing receptivity through theurgic ritual. A key element of theurgy is the use of symbols, physical objects that contain immaterial aspects of the God within their material form. That is to say, the symbol and the God are ontologically linked. These symbols can be things such as words, colors, images, plants, metals, and most critically to me, sound. Iamblichus's idea of the ritual activation of symbols in theurgy was startlingly close to my goal of an initiatory concert. I discovered that I was in fact seeking to create theurgic music. Unfortunately, the details of what actually happened in these rituals are largely lost to history. They may have included sitting for long periods in silence, perhaps in the dark. Perhaps various lighting effects broke the darkness. Magic tools like the bull roarer or the rhombus of Hecate may have been used. Hallucinogens may have been ingested. These are all techniques used to induce trance or ecstatic states. Of particular interest is the recitation or chanting of invocations and divine names, also known as mystical voices or Voces mysticae. These are collections of phonemes, sounds without semantic content or external referent. In other words, they are nonsense. Iamblichus explains that these names were revealed by the gods and must never be translated or altered because it is their sonic quality, not their meaning, which empowers them as divine symbols. He also reminds us that what is meaningless to us is not meaningless to the gods. Mystical words are found in various ancient sources in addition to Neoplatonism, including Judaism, Christianity, and Gnosticism, and also bear an uncanny resemblance to Vedic mantras. When we look briefly at a few examples of Voces mysticae, we will clearly see that the formulas have no semantic content, but we want to pay special attention to their formal arrangements or syntax as well as their transformations. Strictly speaking, syntax is the order of words, but here I will use it more broadly to describe the ordering and reordering of phonemes or syllables. I'm also using form in the sense of musical form, that is, the pattern of sonic repetition and contrast. And I will analyze the mystical words the same way that I would analyze the motivic patterns within a musical theme. The first example, which I will not say, because I can't, comes from the Greek magical papyri, and we can quickly see that it is a palindrome, the same forwards and backwards, a feature that is easier to see than to hear. The form is A, B, C, A prime, B prime. And in music, we refer to themes by letters, and then the prime just means a variation of that. This is a local expression of the musical form of the rondo, and we should note the embedded palindromes in each section. So we have I have a little pointer. Is the arrow showing up? You have a palindrome, and then within each B section, there's another little embedded palindrome. The second example is also from the Greek magical papyri. It includes all 7 of the Greek vowels and undergoes a clear process of rotation, which makes analysis almost redundant. You can see how the first letter keeps going back on each level. The final example is a line from the Orphic gold tablets, where the Voces mysticae are embedded within regular language. And here, the form of the Voces mysticae is less systematic, but we can still find a musical form. If we look at each syllable of the first word, te, mai, tia, te, we see a pattern of A, B, A prime, A, while the second word, et ta, tia, tapta, yields A, B, B, A prime, B prime. The examples of the palindrome and the rotation clearly suggest intentional patterning and transformation. The last 2 examples are less obvious, but demonstrate the standard musical practice of varied restatements of limited material. And all of the examples demonstrate organizational patterns commonly used in music. These musical characteristics are present in all language, but become clearer here because we are freed from any semantic obligation, which allows us to focus on the sonic components of the words. The musical qualities inherent in the Voces mysticae made them a fitting starting point to develop a contemporary theurgic music. Exercising my artistic license, I decided to combine the Voces mysticae with transformation techniques appropriated from the Kabbalah. Since the Kabbalah includes meditating on word transformations, this didn't seem like too much of a stretch. Here, the saxophone becomes the sonic medium through which the incantation is made, and the concert program becomes an imagined theurgic ritual. This music is also experimental. The musical content may be unfamiliar and even a little weird. And I would say, after I was fortunate, I couldn't have had a better preamble than the keynote this morning, now that you've had a lot of music theory background. And this is definitely in sort of the Stockhausian tradition. Although I don't know anybody who has ever said Stockhausen and tradition in the same sentence before. Both in Neoplatonic and Kabbalistic theurgy, we are moving to ontological levels beyond human comprehension. So we should be prepared to encounter the mysterious, the strange, and even the frightening. Because of this, it seems appropriate that the music should challenge established standards of aesthetic decorum. For added effect, I also choose to associate the saxophone with the aulos, the double-piped reed instrument from ancient Greece, which Plato tells us induces mania. With all this as preamble, here's how I applied these techniques to the piece Voces Mystica. The first movement is entitled Abulafa, after the 13th century Spanish Kabbalist Abraham Abulafa, who was known for his use of letter permutation. In Umberto Eco's 1989 novel, Foucault's Pendulum, which I'm guessing lots of us have read, the protagonist uses the find replace function on their computer named Abu to demonstrate Kabbalistic transformation. They enter the following text. Abu, do another thing now. Belbo orders Abu to change all words, make each A become Aka and each O become Ula for a paragraph to look almost finished. Performing the substitution transforms the text into a series of new Voces mysticae, which I will not read. This is the Kabbalistic technique of notikiron, where a text can be expanded by replacing a single letter with a group of letters in a reverse acronym, as in this example, or conversely, a text may be contracted into an acronym. And I use this text as the basis of the music. I assigned each letter a short musical motive as seen here. And if you don't read music, I would invite you to look at the music simply as a graphic icon or sort of looking at a secret language or secret writing system. The musical motives are presented in the same order that their corresponding letters appear in the text, so that the music spells out the passage. In this example, Abu, do another. And if we follow the top line, you see Abu, do another. And each corresponding letter motive is placed on top of that. When the text is expanded through notikiron, the music goes through a similar expansion by inserting the Aka and Ula themes in place of the A and the O themes, as seen here. So if we started with just a single note for the A, then the whole Aka theme is placed in. And you can see in the second line, the same thing happens, where A is expanded textually through the Kabbalistic practice and also musically. The second movement akrakanarba is a magic formula from the Greek magical papyri. It goes through a process of subtraction which yields the form of the piece. Again, I assign motives to the letters, as you can see here, and arrange them to spell out the text akrakanarba. But here, each time a motive reappears, it went through multiple transformations based on gematria. Neither Greek nor Hebrew have independent characters for numbers, so numbers are notated with letters. This means that each word has a numerical value, and symbolic relationships can be found between words that share the same number. To adapt this to music, I used a standard integer pitch notation to assign the numerical values. And this is something we use in post-tonal music theory. Other numbers could have been assigned to pitches. To transform the motive, I first calculated the numerical value of the original motive, the R theme here, in a procedure borrowed not from Kabbalah but from the composer Igor Stravinsky. Each time the motive returns, it was rotated so that the first note moved to the end. So simply replacing that. Then the whole motive was transposed to start in the original pitch value, which generated a new numerical value. So in its original form, the motive equaled 36, now it equals 31. In the final step, I added additional pitches indicated by the little triangles, were added to make the numerical value match the original motive. So we could say that the original motive and the transformed motive have the same gematria value. And I figure after this morning's primer on music theory, you're all ready for this part. The last movement, which I don't know how to pronounce that, is my own magical formula based on all 5 English vowels. It goes through a process of subtraction, again, based on notochaeron. So each A is replaced with UIO and so forth. The transformation can go on infinitely, so I stopped after 7 expansions to generate the form of the piece, which we see here. Here are the motives for use with each letter. In this movement, I use the transformational process of Tumura, where letters are substituted through rotating the alphabet, which we can see here. So in this form, A is replaced with Z, B with Y, and so forth. And when we do that, we can take a common word like saxophone and create a new invocation from that. I used a similar technique musically by folding the chromatic scale around itself, which we learned about this morning. Each time the chromatic scale is repeated, it simply rotates to generate different pitches. And if anybody is a music theorist, just for all of these generate the same prime form related by transposition or inversion. I then found the gematria value for each of these new motives, which changed each time the pitches were substituted. So as in the previous movement, pitches again. So I started with the original motives, found the gematria value, performed the substitution to get new pieces, which generated new numerical values, and again added pitches to keep the same numerical value. That's all the music theory in this one. On a strictly musical level, the system of embedding voces mysticae in Kabbalistic transformations is a form of algorithmic composition. That is, composition where rules that are largely independent of musical considerations control the generation of musical material. Because the music came from following rules and not my conscious intention, I had to wait to see how the rules played out and what the musical results would be, which was a bit of a revelation. On a technical level, this was an effective, albeit somewhat tedious way to generate a lot of music relatively quickly without doing a lot of actual composing. All in all, I am pleased with the results since the music strikes an effective balance between unity and variation, and I use similar procedures in my piece, The Chaldean Oracles, which I will play later tonight. Well, what I found most interesting about this project was the effect working with these materials had on me. Shuffling letters and pitches around on the page had an unexpected meditative effect. I can't say I experienced an altered state of consciousness, but there was a certain shift from rational consciousness towards a kind of alert calmness, a bit like one might experience when drawing a mandala or doing Tai Chi. I think this has something to do with focusing on syntax, on patterns and transformations at the exclusion of semantics or musical content. At the same time I was writing this piece, I discovered the work of the Vedic scholar Fritz Stahl, who holds the provocative thesis that rituals are rules without meaning. Stahl claims that rituals are based exclusively on rules that control the order and execution of their component activities, vocalizations, postures, motions, and so forth. That is to say, they're rules of syntax, none of which has any semantic content. Everything that happens in a ritual is meaningless. Any symbolic content found in a ritual, according to Stahl, was added later as an interpretation of its purely syntactical activity. This position clearly raises plenty of questions and criticism, and I do not intend to defend Stahl's thesis that all ritual is meaningless. But the emphasis his argument places on syntax, on order and formal arrangement over content is worth considering. This is basically what I did to write this music. I simply followed the rules of my imagined ritual to generate the form of the piece, that is, its syntax. Even though the Kabbalistic transformations in the music are essentially inaudible, those relationships are still present and they seem to do something. The impact of the piece seems to come less from the musical ideas themselves and more from their syntactical and transformational relationships. My guess is that if I changed the musical themes but still followed the same rules, thus preserving the same relationships, the music would have a similar effect. This gives some credibility to Stahl's idea that ritual rules are more important than ritual content. Linguistic semantics are fundamental to discursive conceptual thought. After all, semantic meaning is the very mechanism through which concepts are defined. The Voces mysticae subvert this by simultaneously invoking and denying our expectation for semantic content. We recognize a word and anticipate its meaning, but do not find it. This is similar to the way we hear music as organized sounds that suggest meaning without ever firmly establishing it. Indeed, I would argue that the Voces mysticae are essentially music. Both are organized sound without semantic content. This transformation of signifiers into sounds, of words into music, begins to break down conceptual thought by undercutting its semantic foundation. This helps explain their role in ritual as a tool to transcend the limits of rational thought and open up more mystical, supra-rational modes of knowledge, Iamblichus's unknowing receptivity. This process parallels the idea of ritual as exclusively syntactical action. By focusing on actions that may or may not make sense to us over meaning as defined by rational concepts, we activate mystical states that move past the limits of discursive thought. If rituals really are rules without meaning, it seems that the Kabbalist and Neoplatonists, as well as other ritual practitioners, understood and developed methods to cultivate the profound psychospiritual effect of syntax, patterns, and transformation in and of themselves, independent of any ritual meaning and content. Action supersedes knowledge as a means of encountering the gods. To the extent that my music was successful, I think it is due to its focus on syntactical elements and their innate effect, rather than on emotional and melodic content as is customary in most music. In writing these pieces, I have tried to embed the sacred magical structures of the Voces mysticae and the Kabbalah into the music. Although instrumental music is obviously not able to pronounce the original divine names, it can still participate in their formal qualities, patterns, and transformations. In this way, I hope to create music that is not just inspired by the idea of ritual, but one that embodies ritual structures and processes within it, in the hope of creating an initiatory effect for the audience and for myself. Thank you.
We have time for questions?
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's absolutely fascinating and artistically really cool.
Okay.
Are you aware of the suggestion that's been proposed in Papyrology, ancient music, sort of that because the Greek vowels were used to represent the 7 notes in the scale before they were staves, that the vowel strings in the TGM are musical notation?
I think I've heard that. I'm not super familiar with that, with the work, but
this is out there. So these, especially when you get that cyclical string of vowels that just, well, it's like proto-serialist, right?
Right. Yeah.
In a 70-tone scale. But so in that sense, that goes against what you just said. That obviously I can't interpret on the saxophone the Voces mysticae. I said, well, some of the Voces mysticae have the vowel strings.
Well, that's true.
I may well be able to.
Yeah, well, one of the key differences between anything vocal and anything instrumental is the amount of variation you can make on one pitch. And so if you think of consonants as articulation, and vowels as sustained tone. I mean, that's a perfect analogy. But the range of consonances I can create are much smaller than what we can do in spoken language, so it's a little bit different that way.
You're trapped in temperation as well, which you're trapped in contour pitches.
Yeah.
When applied to an ancient Greek context, probably almost certainly not.
Well, yeah, that's another issue also. But I guess the idea that I was trying to use was if you can find the relationship between items. And in this case, I filled them in with pitches. You could fill them in with words. You could fill them in with different fruits. But there's still if we have our apple, pear, banana, and we rotate them, we're going through the same process. So in a way, the rule is completely independent of the contents, which is sort of what Stahl's idea is about ritual, is that you're doing things. As long as you do the things in relationship to each other, you fulfilled the ritual content. Now, I think that's probably a little mercenary on his point, but as I actually wrote a little ritual that I do based on purely random things that I do in class, and the students are completely freaked out because I'm chanting these things that I made up based on. I took the last line of Stahl's essay is neither the ants nor we are any of the worse for it. And I make up magic words based on that and recite them, and I have actions that don't mean anything, and the students are all freaked out, but they remember it. They never forget that in class, even if they don't get it at the time. So rather than focusing on the particular sonic contents, which when we get into the reciting different vowels, I think we are, it's the relationships of pieces that I was really interested in. And I found that, I'm a better improviser than composer, and so how do you actually get it down on paper and get everything written was always really hard for me. But because I basically prefab the piece, I follow each letter and I do the mathematics, and then I just lay them out in kind. So one of the effective or the real practical tools is it just helps me get the large scale form done. I totally forgot what the original question was.
It was about the idea that these vowel strings were used for notation. They were meant to be chanted.
That makes a lot of sense.
And there's a precedent for it. And because that is how we know some Greek music was written, just using vowels. The way we go down.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
But so you're taking, if I could just make one more comment, you're taking young Lucas as an inspiration, but you're breaking his main rule, right? You're not sticking to the Voces magnificat that you've inherited from the gods. That can never be changed, they have to be kept.
Yeah, you're right.
You're like riffing.
You are, yes, you're right on that. I did. And I've discussed this with a friend of mine who's Hindu, I gave him some stuff from Stahl to read, and he hated it. Because for him, the mantras, they're meaningful. But again, it's a question of artistic license. I originally followed closely to the patterns of the original Voces mysticae, but musically it became a little static, and it needed some more transformation. So I just decided I would apply Kabbalah to this other stuff.
Any other questions? Can I ask you something, Randall?
Yeah. Why, yes, Dan.
So I'm very interested in, first of all, the definition of ritual you put forward is kind of these actions or performances without inherent meaning or semantic content, and then sort of superimposed on kind of the information content of musical instruments, which we might recognize as sort of devoid of the same semantic content that we see in ritual. My question is there not maybe still some sort of sublinguistic or pre-linguistic semantics within our choice of instrument already that might kind of structure the ritual in ways that the author or the composer did not intend? So I guess what I mean is the difference between ritual music composed for cymbals and ritual music composed for the sound of wind might carry things quite differently. Those are two kind of egregious examples of what I mean. But
how I'm interpreting what you said is that we carry cultural I heard you asking, do we carry certain cultural expectations with instruments? And with saxophone, as soon as you hear the word saxophone, you're thinking of a specific musical genre, I'm guessing. You're thinking of jazz. And as a non-jazz musician, saxophonist, I spend my life saying, I play saxophone, and then hearing, I love jazz, and then having to explain. So I started to say, I play saxophone, now take everything you're thinking and forget that. So we bring in certain cultural contexts. So I'm not really, I necessarily write for saxophone because it's for me. So I have to just work around that. But maybe that adds to the disconnect, because if you see a saxophone and you're expecting to hear jazz, and then you have this sort of initiatory performance, maybe it's again another level of removing yourself from expectations. Sure. I'm not sure if that,
no, that's great.
that applies.
Thank you.
To your question. Yep.
Do you ever play two saxophones at the same time? Like,
I have tried that. It's hard and uncomfortable. I only have one soprano. If I had two sopranos, I need to get if I had the extra $4,000 for the second soprano, then I really could do the Alos thing. I want somebody to build a single mouthpiece that goes to a neck that has two joints, so I can do both. But that's something that's on my mind to work on.
All right, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, Randall.
Thanks.